I still remember the day my mom passed away like it was yesterday. Everything changed in a moment. One phone call, and the world I knew just stopped. My mom wasn't just a mother, she was the glue that held our family together. Kind, patient, always smiling even when things were hard. Losing her felt like losing the air I breathed. And while we were all struggling in our own way, I never expected what came next, especially from my dad. He's always been the quiet one, strong, steady, not the kind to share feelings openly. After the funeral, he kept to himself mostly, staying busy with small tasks around the house, trying to avoid long conversations. I thought he was just grieving in his own way. But a few days later, he called me into the living room and asked me to sit down. I could tell something was different. His eyes weren't just sad, they looked scared. That's when he said something I honestly never thought I'd hear, something that shook me even more than the loss itself. I wasn't ready for it. I don't think anyone could be. For a moment, I wondered if I'd even heard him right. I just sat there, frozen, trying to process what he had just told me. Everything I thought I knew about our family, about him, even about my mom, suddenly felt uncertain. At first, I didn't know what to say. My heart was already heavy with grief, and now this? I didn't know whether to cry more, get angry, or just walk away. But I knew one thing for sure: nothing would be the same after that moment. And what he told me? Well, I'll tell you in the next part. You're not going to believe it. I stared at my dad, waiting for him to repeat what he'd just said, thinking maybe I had misunderstood. But he didn't say it again. He just looked at me, like he was waiting for my reaction. My hands were cold, my stomach twisted. I could hear the clock ticking behind us, but everything else felt frozen. He had just told me something that didn't make sense, something about my mom that felt impossible, something that changed everything I thought I knew about our family. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but no words came out. He finally looked down, like he couldn't bear to see my face. And then he started talking, slowly, carefully, like every word was heavy. He said there were things he and my mom never told me, things they thought were better left in the past. But now that she was gone, he said he couldn't keep it in anymore. He said it was time I knew the truth. I didn't even know what truth he was talking about. My mind was racing. Was it something about their relationship? Something about me? I kept thinking back to little moments, quiet conversations they used to have that I didn't think much about, odd silences when certain topics came up, the way my mom would sometimes just stare out the window with a strange look on her face. I had always brushed those moments off. Now they were coming back to me like puzzle pieces that suddenly might fit together. He said it all started before I was even born. Something happened back then that they agreed to keep hidden. He said my mom made him promise not to ever speak of it, not to anyone, not even to me. And he kept that promise until now. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It felt like I was in someone else's life. I tried to stay calm, but my chest was tight. I wanted to know more, but part of me was scared to hear it. He looked at me and said, "I don't know if you'll ever forgive me for this, but you deserve to know." Then he paused again. That silence was louder than anything he'd said. And just as he was about to tell me everything, the doorbell rang. The sound of the doorbell cut through the tension like a blade. My dad and I both jumped slightly, like we'd been pulled out of some fragile trance. He didn't move at first. We just sat there staring at each other. The moment we were in, whatever truth he was about to tell me, was suspended in the air, just hanging there, unfinished. Then the doorbell rang again, longer this time, like whoever was out there wasn't planning on leaving. "I'll get it," he said quietly, standing up slowly. like his body suddenly felt twice as heavy. As he walked toward the door, I sat frozen, trying to make sense of what was going on. My mind kept spinning around his words. A promise, a hidden truth, something before I was born. I had so many questions. What had they kept from me all these years? Was it something about a family secret? A hidden relative? Something about my birth? From the hallway, I could hear muffled voices. My dad speaking low, someone else responding sharply. A woman's voice. It wasn't someone I recognized. Their tone wasn't exactly friendly, but it wasn't loud either, just tense. After a minute, I heard the door close, and my dad came back into the room, his face pale. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Who was that?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he sat back down and ran a hand through his hair, clearly shaken. "Someone from the past," he said finally. "Someone who knows the truth, too." That didn't help. It only made things worse. Who was she? What did she know? And why now? Why was all of this happening right after my mom died? As he sat there staring at the floor, I noticed for the first time just how tired he looked. Not just physically, but deep down. Like he'd been carrying something heavy for years, maybe decades. I thought about my mom again, how she'd always seemed like she was holding something in too. All those quiet afternoons, all those long silences that didn't make sense at the time. And now I was starting to wonder, what if my entire childhood was built on something that wasn't true? My dad looked up at me again, his eyes full of something I couldn't quite read. "Before I say anything else," he said, "you need to know. This changes everything." I sat there, barely breathing, as my dad stared at me like he was trying to figure out where to begin. Whatever he was about to say, I could tell it was something he'd replayed in his head 1,000 times. Something he'd wanted to say, maybe even needed to, but couldn't. Until now. The words felt stuck between us like a thick fog that neither of us could see through yet. "The woman at the door," he said slowly. "Her name is Layla. She knew your mom before I ever met her, back when they were in college. There's a lot I didn't know either, not until much later. Your mom didn't talk much about that time. I always thought she just liked to keep the past in the past. But now I realize she was protecting something." My heart was pounding. 100 images were flashing through my mind. Old photo albums, my mom's journals I'd never been allowed to read. That one time I asked her if she ever wanted to travel back to her hometown, and she quietly changed the subject. All those signs I'd ignored. My dad leaned in slightly, lowering his voice like we weren't alone in the house. "She made me promise to never contact Layla. Not ever. She said if she came back, it would bring everything down. I didn't understand at the time, but I agreed. I loved her. I trusted her." He paused, then looked straight at me. "But your mom wasn't always honest with me either, and now that she's gone, Layla thinks it's time for you to know what she couldn't tell you herself." I felt dizzy. What could possibly be so serious that my mom made my dad swear silence for life? What kind of past were they hiding that was enough to keep another woman away for decades? I stood up and started pacing, trying to shake off the growing sense of unease. "Just tell me, Dad. Please. I can handle it." He nodded slowly, then reached into the drawer of the side table. From it, he pulled out a small faded envelope. It looked old, like it had been opened and resealed too many times. He handed it to me carefully, like it was fragile, like it held something more than paper. "That letter. Your mom wrote it years ago, before you were born. She told me to only give it to you if something ever happened to her." I stared at the envelope in my hands. My name was written on the front in her handwriting. My chest tightened. I wasn't ready, Not really. But something deep inside told me that whatever was in this letter would change everything I thought I knew about her, and maybe even about myself. Before I could open it, my phone buzzed. A message. It was from an unknown number. Don't trust your dad. He's not telling you the whole story. And just like that, everything flipped again. My fingers tightened around the phone as I stared at the message. My heart was already racing from everything my dad had just said, but this was something else. Don't trust your dad. He's not telling you the whole story. The words echoed in my mind like a warning I didn't know how to process. I looked up at him, still sitting across from me, watching me closely like he was waiting for my reaction. Did he know about the message? Had he seen it flash across the screen? I tried to keep my face calm. It's just someone from work, I lied, slipping the phone into my pocket. I wasn't ready to show him the message. Not yet. I needed time to figure out what was going on. Everything he had just told me already felt overwhelming, but now I wasn't sure who to believe. What if there was more to the story than he was letting on? What if Layla's return wasn't random, and this message, whoever sent it, was part of something bigger? I looked back at the envelope in my hand. My mom's handwriting, gentle and familiar. Part of me wanted to tear it open right then and there, but the other part, the louder part, told me to wait. I needed to be sure I was ready. I needed to know more before I read whatever she had written all those years ago. I quietly slipped the envelope into my backpack and stood up. I just need some air, I told my dad. He didn't stop me. He just nodded like he understood. But something in his eyes looked different now. Nervous, maybe even scared. Outside, the cool air hit me like a wave. I pulled out my phone again and looked at the message. There was no name, no profile picture, just the number and a new message waiting. Ask him about the night of the car accident, the one in '98. Ask him who was driving. I froze. I was barely a kid in '98. I only remembered flashes, bright lights, sirens, my mom crying, the smell of smoke. They always told me it was just a bad accident, that everyone was okay, but we never talked about it again. It was like the whole thing had been wiped from our family's story. I never even thought to question it. I took a shaky breath and called the number. It rang once, then clicked. "Hello?" I said. No answer, just silence. Then, a woman's voice. "You don't know the truth yet, but you're close. Just don't let him read the letter before you do." The line went dead. I turned around and looked back at the house. The curtains were slightly open, and I could see my dad watching me from the window. Suddenly, I wasn't sure if I was the one uncovering secrets, or walking straight into a trap. I stood there outside the house, the letter in my bag and the woman's voice still echoing in my ears. Don't let him read the letter before you do. I didn't even know what that meant, but I knew I couldn't wait anymore. My hands were shaking as I pulled the envelope out and opened it right there under the porch light. My mom's handwriting covered the page, soft, careful, and full of emotion. She started by saying she loved me more than anything, that whatever I learned, I needed to remember that love. Then she wrote about the car accident, the one in '98. She said I deserved to know the truth, that it wasn't an accident. My dad had been driving, but not just driving. He had been arguing with someone, Layla. She had shown up unexpectedly, and my mom had caught them together. They had been more than friends once, long before my parents were married. That night, Layla followed them in her car, trying to confront my mom. The argument escalated. My dad was distracted, angry, swerving down a wet road. That's when the crash happened. But it wasn't just a crash. Someone else was in the car too. My mom had been pregnant, with a second child, a sibling I never got to meet. The crash caused her to lose the baby. And for years, She lived with that pain in silence. She never forgave my dad completely, even though she stayed for me. She asked him never to tell me, but in her letter, she said I had the right to know. I was stunned, trying to hold back tears when I walked back inside. My dad looked up, eyes wide, already knowing I had read it. He opened his mouth to explain, but I stopped him. Why didn't you tell me about the baby? He froze. His silence said everything. But then, just as the truth settled between us, he whispered something that stopped me cold. You need to ask Layla where your sibling is, because your mom was wrong. He looked at me, tears welling in his eyes. The baby survived. I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. I stood there, staring at my dad, heart pounding, my mind racing to keep up. What do you mean the baby survived? I asked, barely able to get the words out. He took a deep breath and sat down, his hands trembling. Your mom thought she lost the baby that night. The doctors told us it was over. But a few days later, she got a call from the hospital. There had been a mistake. She had gone into early labor from the crash, but the baby survived. Layla was there. She stepped in when your mom couldn't. She made decisions. She raised the child. I couldn't speak. My entire world had just flipped, again. All these years, I thought I was an only child. And now, suddenly, I had a sibling, someone out there, raised by the woman who had once come between my parents. My dad looked at me, guilt written all over his face. Your mom didn't want you to know. She thought it would only bring pain, but I couldn't keep it from you anymore. Layla said it was time. It all made sense now. The message, the visit, the secrecy. Layla had come back to prepare me, to lead me to the truth in her own way. Not to hurt me, but to open a door that had been locked for too long. I spent the next few days processing everything. Grief, anger, confusion, but also a strange sense of peace. The secrets were finally out. I read my mom's letter over and over, hearing her voice in every word. I knew she made the choices she thought were right, even if they were hard. And then, one afternoon, I got another message. Just a name and a location. No explanation. But I knew what it meant. My sibling, my brother, was ready to meet me. As I stood at the edge of this new chapter, I realized something important. Families aren't just about the stories we're told, but also the truths we're brave enough to uncover, even when they hurt, especially when they heal. This story started with loss, but it ended with something I never expected: hope.